Hi friends, my name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Fate Signals from Vega. Today I was going around the shopping centre. Now this isn't going to be a political video. This is going to be about veganism. So please stick with me because this is all relevant to every form of discrimination there is. This in relation to speciesism, sexism, heterosexism, and so forth. They're all related and they all cause violence. So please stick with me while I talk about this issue of veganism, because that's what veganism is. It's an ethical position. So today I was walking around the supermarket, which I don't particularly like to do because there's so many animal products there. But we were in a section where they had this particular product. And as you notice, that product has RSPCA approved. The RSPCA is the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. When I see things like this, it kind of makes me more annoyed than when I see false advertising about the happy cows in the dairy industry and so forth. It's all related, of course, but I mean, in my country, the RSPCA, people look to that particular organization, an organization that is supposed to, quote-unquote, protect animals. And what people think of when they think of protecting animals, in quotes, is that the base assumption of this is that animals are here for us to use, and it's okay to use them as long as we do it nicely, as long as they're treated, quote-unquote, humanely. So that's the assumption that most of us make because we've been indoctrinated to believe that animals are here for us to use. We're not supposed to harm them, but somehow we think that as long as they're treated nicely, up until the point that we kill them, and that even at the point that we're killing them, that also it's done, quote-unquote, humanely, then that makes it okay. So we've already got this basic assumption that animals are here for us to use as resources, and that's because we've been indoctrinated to believe that since we were born, and our society is deeply speciesist. Just like if we were born into a society, and oh, surprise, we are, where white people tend to have most of the power, the assumption is that that it's going to favor white people, and we're going to be, the laws are going to favor white people, and people of color are going to be not very significant in the laws and in how we treat one another. And as a white person, if you're born into a society where there's this white privilege, then you're going to be benefiting from that white privilege, and other people of color are not, and you may not even realize that you're benefiting from it because everything has been geared that way since you were born into this society. So these indoctrinations are very powerful, and so the most powerful really is speciesism, because we're completely devaluing and using as resources 99.99% of the planet's population who are non-human. We view them either as entertainment or food or clothing, just generally as resources. They're sort of they're there for us to use, or they're there for us to look at. You'll often hear people talk about that when it comes to climate crisis. When they talk about other animals, they're talking about it more about how sad it is that we won't have them on the planet to look at. That's kind of the underlying sort of position of people, not even realizing that that's their position, rather than that's awful that these animals who have their own interests in living are not going to get to be on the planet because of our anthropogenic climate crisis what we've created for them. Speciesism underpins that. It underpins, the fact that we think that, going back to the RSPCA approved animal product that I saw, that it's an animal product that I saw today. It shows that it's making us feel better. It's soothing our conscience about the products that we're using that we know are animal products, if we're even that conscious, really, of it, because, it's just taken for granted that animal products are part of our diet. There's this soothing of our conscience when we see things like RSPCA approved. Now, this product was chicken broth. Well, I don't see how you know, the chickens that are used in that broth are no more privileged, if that's possible, than any chicken that is. And chickens lead a mostly horrendous life, and in the end they're killed in the same awful slaughterhouse. There's no such thing as a humane slaughterhouse. There isn't. And if you think there is, then you need to go and spend some time in one. Spend some time in a chicken slaughterhouse, or spend some time in where the larger animals get killed, and see if you think it's humane, whatever that means. It's filled with blood and horror, and the slaughterhouse workers get PTSD, a lot of them, and it's even hard in Tasmania for people for the industry, for the meat processing, in quotes, that's a euphemism for slaughtering, meat processing industry, to find people to work in these slaughterhouses. That's how much fun it is working in them. They're awful. And oftentimes, because of the fast production line of these slaughterhouses, animals aren't killed, they're not stunned properly, and they end up being conscious at, sort of when they're, when other processes are taking place, like when they're being cut at the neck, or in the case of cows, there's often cows are alive, they're conscious and alive at the hide ripping machine, and so they have their skin stripped off them when they're alive. This is what happens today in the fast-paced slaughterhouse production lines. There's a lot of animals, like for example, there's millions of pigs every year are boiled alive in these slaughterhouses because they're not stunned properly, because of the fast production lines. There's a lot of chickens who are mangled and there has to be slaughterhouse workers running around trying to kill them afterwards, and all this kind of thing. There's lots and lots of chickens that are boiled alive, and these are sentient animals. There's no question. Science says you only have to look at the science, and you only have to you only have to spend time with these individuals, with individual pigs or individual chickens, or cows and whoever they are. You only have to spend time with them to see they're sentient. So there's no question of sentience, that they have self-awareness and so forth. There's no question of that. And of course they feel pain, just like we do. In fact, lobsters are supposed to, according to science, feel more pain than we think they do. And here we are shoving them into boiling pots alive, and it's awful, and they're trying to get out of the pot. It's just awful. So, there's all these things, crabs, etc. There's all these things we have to think about. But, this humane type of nonsense, you know what that really means? What it is it's a scam to sell expensive animal products to the public. And anybody who has any understanding of what goes on in slaughterhouses, or what goes on even on the mom and pop farms, particularly dairy farms, where they take the little calves away from the mothers, and the mothers cry for days, and there's repeated impregnations of the mothers, and when the mother is no longer productive, she's killed as well in the same awful slaughterhouse. The happy animal products which is what we call them, which is what vegans call them, happy animal products, which is just sort of like mocking the idea, because even if they were killed in the most wonderful way, the most gentle, and stroking their head and then slitting their throat and playing music to them, or even if, no matter how nicely they're treated on a farm, nice in quotes, it's still wrong, because they're sentient and we have no right to use them as resources. And not only that, we don't need animal products at all to survive, because we can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources, and millions of vegans can attest to that. I've been vegan for 14 years now. So, we don't need these animal products. So the only thing we're putting through torture and killing of 1 trillion land and aquatic animals every year globally is because we think they taste good. And that's not good enough. And also, it's the animal agriculture is destroying the environment. And I'll show you this meme again, just in case you haven't seen it yet, on my channel. So these humane animal products, in quotes, the humane in quotes, you know, the compassionately raised and all those kind of sort of misleading labels that you see, they're all designed to sell expensive animal products and all designed to soothe our conscience and to say to us, don't worry, these animals had a happy life and they only had, quote unquote, one bad day. That's not true. If we really think about it, if we really thought about it and thought about, say, our dog or our cat being raised on a farm and being repeatedly impregnated and having their little kittens or whatever, or puppies taken from them immediately, and some of them killed because they're no benefit, say, to that industry. And then they were enslaved for that time, for a short time really, maybe 18 months or maybe 5 years. And then they just took them, put them in a truck, and then took them along to a slaughterhouse and then killed them. I mean, I don't think we'd think that was okay. We'd be horrified at the thought of our beloved being treated that way. And that's because we have a personal relationship with them, really, which we don't with these animals that are on our plates or on our backs, or other animals that are used for entertainment and so forth. We don't see them that way because we haven't had a personal relationship with them, and they've been demonized and vilified by society to be sort of thought of as stupid or whatever, these awful speciesist things that we put onto animals of another species who have lots and lots of things that they can do that we can't do, but we don't recognize that. We just think because they aren't like us in quotes, that means that they're expendable. That means that we can do with them what we wish. We used to think that, and we still do, about people, other races. Western countries treat other races on this planet a bit like that, because we demonize certain races, like at the present time. We've been demonizing Muslims, and now we're demonizing, they're not a race, but we've been demonizing different groups, like Muslims. It's like we pick certain groups, like, say, Russia, or in the past it was the Vietnamese and so forth, or in the case of the Middle East, Iraqis, and we demonize and demonize until, and vilify and reduce to other so badly, we don't seem to have a problem going in and just bombing the bejesus out of their country and taking their resources and then taking over. We couldn't do that unless we actually had a really base feeling that these people were different and lesser. We couldn't do that. Could you imagine if we did that to, say, France? We decided, okay, the French, we don't like the French, or they've got something we need, and we're going to bomb France, and then we're going to take what's in France. I mean, we wouldn't be, I don't think we'd think that was okay, because, France is supposed to be a Western ally. But, that's why, because they're white and because they're already doing, say, the US bidding, so therefore, it's okay to leave them alone. But underneath it all, we sort of protect our own. Western allies sort of think that whiter people, lighter colored skinned people, are not to be treated in the same way that we treat brown-skinned people and black-skinned people. And that's an indoctrination that we carry, and that obviously, because where is the pushback on the wars? Where is the pushback? Why do we think it's okay that they do that? And yet we'd probably be horrified if they were doing in France or Germany what they're doing in, say, Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's where these discriminations are really dangerous. The discrimination we have towards other animals is so dangerous because we're killing 1 trillion land and aquatic animals every year. And it's destroying the planet to boot. And why is that okay? And how come slaughterhouses are always on the outskirts so you can never ever see what goes on? And that most people would never want to see what goes on in a slaughterhouse. We know it's wrong. We know it's wrong. Otherwise, why do so many people not want to know the details? And why is it that when an animal is being abused, even if it's a pig, say if somebody sees somebody abusing an individual pig somewhere, people will step in and try and stop it? Because we recognize their sentience and we know it's wrong. So, back to this whole humanely raised thing, the only reason they say something like, if they ever change any welfare, in quotes, welfare standards that if applied to humans would be considered torture, but if they ever change that, it's because they want to fool the public into thinking that animals are treated humanely, and that it's okay. You can eat them. It's all right. You can eat and you can drink their animal products and so forth. It's to soothe your conscience and tell you that it's okay to do these things. But really, all it is for economic efficiency. They only do any sort of change in ways of in these facilities of ways of dealing with animals when at the barest minimum they change something so that they can tell the public a deception, but also that it might benefit them economically. It's all about economic efficiency, and it has nothing to do with the animals. So please note that if you ever see anybody talking about humanely raised and bragging that that's their products, their animal products are really, that the animals are treated nicely and so forth, you can guarantee that it's still awful, and that anyway it's still wrong, but it's still awful, and that it's all about economic efficiency, and it has nothing to do with the animals. This is all a great deception. So we need to get beyond this, all these meat-free Mondays and fish-free Fridays and veganuary and, 3-week nutrition thing and all those kind of things. We need to get past that and just go vegan. Adopt an ethical position that they're sentient animals and we don't need to use them, and recognize their sentience and think, how would I feel if my dog or my cat, and I use the word "my" in quotes because I don't agree with domestication, period, but the dogs and cats are refugees of domestication and is still viewed as property, right? But just because, but we do think of them at present as family members, right? And just imagine, if we imagined if we substituted our dog or our cat for the sort of things that all these different animals go through. I don't think we'd be in such a hurry to eat them at the end, we wouldn't, because and the dogs and cats whom we live with, there's no difference in sentience between them and the animals on our plates or the ones we wear on our backs and so forth. There's no difference. Sentience, there's no levels of sentience, it's just sentience, It was a sudden thing for me when I became vegan. I saw a description of the dairy industry, just the normal functionings of the dairy industry, and it's pretty awful. I invite you to check out something I'm going to leave in the information section or in the comments section of this video about the normal functionings of the dairy industry. And that's what I read. It was a much briefer version than that. It was just a sort of a small description of what happens in the dairy industry, and I was horrified. I had no idea. I hadn't even really thought about the milk. The milk that I was drinking, or the dairy products that I was consuming, that cows don't just produce dairy as a normal thing. That's dairy, that's milk for their child. That's just one part of it, it's just like, it's not normal. We're another species drinking some other species' milk. We're the only species that does that. And the dairy industry is a horror story. So anyway, I read this, that's just a little tiny snippet of, I read all sorts of things, male calves being killed because they're no use to the dairy industry and so forth. That's what I read, and I sort of was horrified, and I thought, I have to stop this immediately. And then I thought, I bet you if the dairy industry is like that, I bet you all these other industries are like that, and sure enough they were. They're all kind of horror stories. Some are got a happier face than others, but it's all non-consensual, and they still have their children taken from them, and they all end up in the same slaughterhouses when they're no longer productive. So, I was just I was reading something recently about, there's big problems in Australia with, water resources, and because the dairy industry is a tremendous consumer of water, tremendous. Like there's 1,000 gallons of water for every 1 gallon of milk. Possibly even more than that. It's a tremendous consumer of resources, the animal agriculture industry. And So I was reading that there's, in parts of New South Wales, I think, or Queensland, I think it's New South Wales, they've had real problems with water shortages because, of climate crisis. So the animal agriculture industry is actually contributing to its own water shortages, right? This is the irony of it, sad irony. And also to the lack of feed because, it's putting stress on agriculture, and so there's less hay and so forth. It's sort of they're responsible for their own demise, really, the animal agriculture industry, although we would be responsible for their demise if we went vegan because we're creating demand for these products. So it's not about the industry, it's about us and what we do, right? But so the animal agriculture industry is complaining because it's got lack of water and asking the government to help them all the time. And they had to kill, in the last week, 150,000 cows because even the cows that they use as breeding as breeders, if I can put it like that. And, they're talking about how sad it is for them as farmers to have to kill all these cows and have to sort of cull, in quotes, the herd because they don't have the water for them. Some farmers just let cows die of, sort of hunger or thirst. I mean, I'm surprised that even this is going on. But they were lamenting because they were losing money. It's all about profit. It's not about cows. It's about profit. That's 150,000 lives were just disposed of in the last week in one state because they didn't have the water for them or enough food for them. And they were lamenting because of the economic loss in some ways because they weren't going to get as much money or whatever. And that's the thing. They're not seen as sentient beings. They're seen as property, as resources, you see. And I see that as a vegan so very sad to hear things like that, even though, of course, they were eventually going to be killed anyway. But I mean, I hate seeing the way these sentient animals are talked about. For example, there was 500,000 cows were drowned recently in Queensland because of all the flooding, which is also climate crisis related. And so those cows are a victim of not only animal agriculture industry and our non-veganism, but they're a victim of the climate crisis. So, and all those cows, a lot of them were drowned and some didn't drown. They were sort of stuck amongst all these rotting corpses, and they were so weakened they couldn't get to any food, and goodness knows what happened to them. And but the farmers, we're talking about how sad that was, not because of the cows and how dreadful that is. They were talking about their loss, the economic loss of these 500,000 cows who drowned, and that then they were looking to the government to sort of compensate them. These are lives. Every one of those cows loved life and didn't want to die. And they certainly didn't want to be either killed in a slaughterhouse or drown because they had nowhere to go. Imagine that if you were caught in this paddock with or caught in this area with hundreds of thousands of cows and you couldn't get away from these floods and you could see it coming up and gradually you eventually drown. You could see all your friends drowning too. Imagine that. Well, this is what we do. This is what we do to these animals, and it makes me so sad. I don't look for these articles, but I come across them every so often when I look at the Weather Channel, and I'll see these articles about, the poor farmers here in Australia, the rain's too much, not enough rain, yada, yada, yada. Government, can you subsidise us, and all this sort of thing. And firstly, I think how sad because they don't, it's all about profitability and loss, economic loss. And then I think, of course, the governments, will say, yes, of course, we'll give you millions and millions of dollars. But the reason those cows drowned is because we're not vegan. We create demand for animal products. So those cows, those 500,000 cows a couple of months ago who drowned, they were only there because we are creating demand for animal products. We're not vegan, and so they drowned. Same with when I hear about, the tens of thousands of salmon who die in oxygen-deprived waters in these factory farming little settings they have in these factory farming or industrialized farming nets that where there's so little room for them to move, it's so stressful for them. And then they end up in the waters become deoxygenated in some way, probably too, it helps that they're producing huge amounts of waste, and then they all suffocate. There's not enough oxygen. And people just put that down to an economic loss. They're sentient too. That's happened here in Tasmania a few times on a regular thing. These so-called Tasmanian salmon happens all the time. And you hear about sheep freezing to death in paddocks, tens of thousands of sheep, or you hear about cows or sheep being in these live exports. The whole ship will become so hot and the sheep just almost cook themselves to death. This is what we put these animals through. And, but even if it was the nicest, even if we had lovely little stalls for everybody and stroked their heads and played them Mozart, and it doesn't matter. It's just all wrong. You know what I'm saying? It's just wrong what we're doing, because we don't need these animal products either. We don't need them. I'm proof of that. We don't need animal products to survive. There's millions of vegans now on the planet. Veganism is it's a fast-growing way of being. And even businesses recognize that now. There's so many vegans, it's more and more vegans. So it's no longer a fringe thing, and this ethical position is taking hold with people. Some people, of course, I don't think they should call themselves vegan, because they're more like plant-based dieters for health. Veganism is an ethical position, but I'll take it if they, although, often people say, oh, I'm not a vegan anymore. They never were a vegan, but I'll take it though at the present time, but I prefer everybody be vegan for ethical reasons. That's what veganism is. But see all the harm and the suffering and the death that we cause? Isn't there enough of that on the planet? In the wars, all these wars for resources and hegemony, can't we stop? We can do a first step to a non-violent life right now and decide to become vegan. And I invite you to check out howtogovegan.org. That's my comprehensive vegan podcast. It's a resource in podcast form, and you can listen to it anytime you wish. I think I've covered a lot of things. It's not recipes and health tips and stuff, although there is a section that is about nutrition, but it's basically a lot of different episodes about the ethics of being vegan, and I think you'll find it beneficial. But anyway, and I also invite you to check out, a friend of mine has a wonderful blog called There's an Elephant in the Room, and her name is Linda Clarke, Clarke, C-L-A-R-K-E. So check that out, because she's a prolific essay writer, and I think one of the best vegan essay writers there is around. And her work, I think if you subscribe to her blog, There's an Elephant in the Room, I think you'll find that it will really change the way you think. And that's what we want. We want people to change the way they think, and also in one's heart. So check that out. And I'll leave another resource too, a couple of other resources. But anyway, I invite you to please check that out, and I thank you so much for sticking with me with this. I hope that I make sense. So I tend to meander. I probably should write notes, but if I did that, I probably wouldn't get round to doing. I'm trying to do daily videos so that just to put out more content. So I tend to just kind of not think a whole lot about particularly vegan things, because I pick some particular thing that happened and branch out from there. But with political stuff, which is all about anti-imperialism and anti-war, I do some reading on that. But anyway, I try to sort of like generally cover things that I think are important. Anyway, so I hope that you'll think about subscribing to this channel. Just click the subscribe button, click the notifications bell twice apparently if you want to receive updates, and click the like button if you like the content. And please leave comments. If you have any questions at all about veganism, I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm more than happy to mentor you if you want to become vegan, to answer your questions. When I say mentor, I mean I'm happy to answer questions and and give advice if I can about how, resources that you can look at, and check out nutritionfacts.org. That's a great one for nutrition in relation to a plant-based diet. And so thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Please go vegan for peace and for the planet. Till next time. Bye for now.